Record now. So first of all, welcome everyone. I know we have people joining us from all over the world, and it constantly amazes me how incredibly resilient and amazing and wonderful you are. And I can't stop thanking you and appreciating you for everything you've been doing this semester and everything you're going through in this program. Real quick, to make sure everybody's using the chat function, throw in where you're joining us from this evening. We'd love to kind of give a sense to you all too, where people are at the McCourt School, because you may only get to meet your fellow classmates, but go ahead, throw in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from. So some DC, Virginia, Mexico City, or California, Connecticut, or Maryland friends. I love the specific neighborhoods, Columbia Heights, thank you. Morocco and Egypt. Okay, you all are pretty baller. Thank you so much for being here. Again, really, really appreciate it, particularly in light of the announcement that was made on Monday, the multiple emails and information that you've received from Barbara, from me, from the university. We wanted to take this opportunity over the next hour to give you some updates, clarify some questions you sent in, and hopefully allow some time for you to ask us any additional questions we may not have answered. We are putting together a frequently asked questions list that we're going to be sending along with this recording tomorrow to all of the students. I also just want to take a moment to recognize, especially as a data-driven, evidence-based policy school, and what we're teaching here to all of you and you're learning, that the decision may have come a little bit as a surprise, given what's going on in the world. Today was a record-breaking day for coronavirus deaths and trends and cases, and it's really hard to kind of reconcile how or why this decision was made. And we have some questions through that, and you are good policy students, so you should be asking about the process. You should be asking about the different particulars of this. So we're going to try to address some of those. So really the goal of the meeting, again, is to kind of share with you the 2020 curricular and extracurricular plans, answer some of the questions provided, and if time, leave some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Barbara, who's going to talk with you more about the instructional plans, some of this reasons how this decision was made, how the semester is going to look, or how we think it's going to look. We'll leave some time for questions, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the extracurriculars, such as access to resources and activities, commencement, and kind of future things. And I will say there's a lot that we just don't know, and we'll be honest and say we don't know, and we will try to get the answers or try to give you the information as quickly as possible to help you make decisions about next semester and the future at McCourt and Georgetown. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara, who will talk with you more about the spring 21 curricular plans.
Great, it's good to see everybody, and there's some of you that I don't see all that often who I haven't seen since last year, but it's good to see all of you. Let me start by just saying, as Leslie said, we will do our best with questions, and I will keep a list of questions that we don't have answers to so that we can get clarification or try to get clarification. I'm actually in 3 meetings a week about next semester, about pandemic related things. So I do have opportunities to try to get answers to questions. And I'll tell you that the decisions that the university is making, they're really difficult decisions. And the decisions are being made across a number of different groups at the university. So there are a lot of things that are not in our control. And there are a lot of conversations that actually I'm not privy to, and Maria, when she's here, was not privy to. And it's very clear that for every decision that we make that some people like, there are other people that don't like that decision, that there's not a win-win here, that there are people that are going to be unhappy. And, you know, and I have to say that there are decisions that have been made that we don't like. but there are things that where our hands are tied, and I'll try to explain the best that I understand things, how decisions have been made and why they've been made, to the best of my ability. So I'm going to talk about a few things related to how decisions were made and what courses will look like in the spring, and then I'll pause for questions, and then I'll talk about a few other things before I turn things back to Leslie. So there are a couple of different committees at Georgetown that are all weighing in on what to do. There's a public health group that meets, and they have actually a lot of power in terms of how we do things, because first and foremost, we want to keep our community safe. And I'll talk about how their decisions have implications for what we're doing. So that's one body that we're dealing with. There's also an operations group that has to think about how to actually make things work. So for example, when we talk about, we're going to have people back and there's going to be testing and there's a protocol, someone's got to figure out exactly how to do that. And that's what the job of that committee is. And that's not always easy stuff to do. So those are two groups. There's university leadership that weighs in on decisions, and university leadership actually entails lots of different groups that at least get an opportunity to share their perspectives. The deans meet regularly. The board of Georgetown meets regularly, and they have a lot of control on what happens. The provost has a student advisory group that he meets with. Actually, he has several that he meets with, so students have a voice. There's something called Main Campus Executive Faculty, which is a body that gives advice to the provost's office that's made up of faculty. There are all of these groups that have some ability to weigh in, but I would say that the decisions are occurring pretty high up. They're occurring with the operations group, with the public health group, and the deans to some extent make recommendations, but I wouldn't say that they're the most powerful in making decisions as far as I can tell. So all of these groups are kind of in play when we think about what we're doing. So when the decision, so the discussion about what spring was going to look like has been going on for quite a while. And all of the groups that I've just talked about have had a voice in thinking about what the spring would look like. One of the things that we did this semester that you may or may not know is that there were about half a dozen or so, a little bit more than that, pilot courses that met in person. That was designed to give us opportunities to test protocols and to see how things would work. So we took feedback from that experience to try to inform decisions. And when I start talking about, excuse me, what was decided, I should be very clear up front that all of this could change on a dime. If our conditions really deteriorate, and they are expected to deteriorate, I don't know what will be the degree of deterioration that would cause us to say we can't come back in person. But I don't think that that's a zero probability event. I think there's some chance that that could happen. And that's where public health has such a big role. DC also has a role. We have to be compliant with what DC requires. So there are all of these pieces that people are trying to pay attention to when they make decisions. Okay, so let's talk about what decisions were made. The decision was made to invite all graduate students back to campus. Now, that means sort of two things. Some of our classes are going to be meeting in a hybrid fashion. And what that means is that you will have an option to attend those classes in person, or you have an option to attend those classes remotely, and you can go back and forth. There's not a rule that you have to commit to one way or another in going to those classes. I think we have about 17, 20, roughly that number of classes. You've seen the list. We distributed that list to you of the classes that will be in hybrid mode. So all of you have been invited back for those classes. In order for you to come into a class at Georgetown, you have to abide by the community compact and all of the testing protocols that are in place. So you saw information about the testing protocols. Obviously, there's going to be physical distancing. You need to wear masks. Someone asked me in class the other day, none of you will pay for any of the testing. Just to be clear, that is an expense, and it's a pretty significant expense that Georgetown will be paying to have people back on campus. But it is a requirement that you abide by those things. So that's what hybrid will look like. Some of your classmates will be in class with you, other classmates will be remote, and it's, you know, the idea is to give you an in-person opportunity for classes. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions. I'm going to talk more about other opportunities. Actually, Leslie's going to talk about other opportunities on campus. I'm going to talk about the calendar next, but let me just see if there are specific questions about the hybrid mode. Just as you're thinking about questions, and let me open my window so I can pay attention to hands, but let me just be clear about who's been invited back to campus. So we have several hundred people currently living on campus, undergraduates that are living on campus, but taking all of their classes remotely because of extraordinarily bad living circumstances that they're in. We have invited back seniors to come back to campus, and we expect there to be about 500 seniors that will live on campus as well. They will also have some of their courses be hybrid. We don't know the extent of that, depends on their schedules. Juniors and seniors and freshmen will not be invited back to campus at this point. So graduate students are invited back, and then seniors will be invited back. Do we know that everyone in the neighborhood who had to test in the fall actually got tested? I don't know the answer to that question. My understanding is that if people are abiding by the compact, that they should be, and that there are pretty severe consequences for not abiding by the community compact. You know, if you look at conversations among undergraduates and see how they're thinking about things, they feel that Georgetown has been very aggressive in terms of putting constraints on behavior and bringing people up on conduct charges if they don't behave in the way that they're supposed to. So from my perspective, from what I can tell, these things have been taken quite seriously, but I don't have an exact figure on that. Layla.
Thank you. Just to kind of go off from that, there have been a few issues of students being put on academic probation or a probation of sort because there was mishap in testing, or they tested the next week, but then they're still on probation. Do you have any information from the administration on what that's going to look like next semester as far as testing goes?
So I can tell you what the conversation has been that I've heard about that. I don't know that anything definitive has been made. The conversation that I've heard about that has mainly been among main campus executive faculty, which I serve on. And the thing that people, I think, are trying to figure out is, you know, how do you use carrots versus sticks to get people to behave in a way that's in the interest in the community? This is a classic externality public good problem that we're dealing with that some of you will learn more about next semester. So I think the feeling is that we have to find a way to get people to be responsive to what's needed, but we don't want to be harsh about it. And so, you know, I think the goal is to find a way to try to be compassionate if people kind of mess up, but also to keep people honest and doing what they need to do to keep the community healthy. So I don't know what it's going to look like. I have not heard any specific discussions about that at this point. I will make a note to bring that up when I talk to people in the next couple of days, because I have several meetings about this in the next couple of days. So I don't know, but I know that people are trying to figure out a way to balance making it not punitive, but making people cooperate. That's the heart of the message that I think people are trying to figure out the balance of. I can't see everybody's pictures at once, so if you could use your blue raise hand, that would be good, or the chat. Otherwise, if I don't see anything else, I'll just keep moving on. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the calendar, the academic calendar. So the academic calendar is also one of these things where I think I was quite involved in different conversations about this. And I can tell you what some of the thinking was and what influenced some of the thinking. One of the things that I can tell you right off is that the Public Health Committee didn't want there to be any breaks. You know, from a pandemic perspective, they did not want there to be any breaks, but the faculty felt strongly, main campus executive faculty, which is, as I said, this advisory board to the provost, and the provost office typically listens to main campus executive faculty, felt strongly that students needed to have breaks for mental health reasons, that the stress of the semester is too intense. And I think that was the right decision to make. The Public Health Committee also felt it was important to push back the start of the semester later to avoid, the time over the holidays. There was concern about the inauguration on the 20th. They wanted to kind of miss that. That was part of the decision making. So they arrived at a January 25th date for classes to start. Students are going to move into campus, those who are living on campus, between like the 21st and I believe the 24th in sort of a staggered way. Parents can't even drop off their kids. They're limited to like little, 2 suitcases or something. They're doing a lot of things to try to make sure it's safe. One of the things that public health was very worried about is people leaving campus. And because of that, they didn't want to have, like typically we have a spring break and an Easter break, and they didn't want to have 2 breaks like that. So what they did is they pushed spring break later so that spring break and Easter break would be combined. Now, the other thing that they did is they made President's Day, which is typically a holiday, is not a holiday this semester or this coming semester. So we're starting late, we're ending late. I think finals end May 19th. And the concern about this schedule is that it's a long period of time for students to wait until spring break. And there was a lot of discussion about how we could try to make the schedule easier for people because of the long lag between when you start classes and when you finally get a break. Just like this semester, you guys are desperate, as we all are, to have our Thanksgiving break. We all need that, and that's the concern. We had thrown around ideas about having like some Wednesdays off during the semester to try to, or some middle of the week classes off to try to make the semester a little bit easier, to give at least some breathing room. We didn't adopt that in part because the science class, that really screws up science classes who have to have labs every week, and that screws up the week of having labs. Eddie Maloney, who is in charge of Candles, which oversees, you've gotten emails from Candles, the teaching sort of arm at Georgetown. He's the director of Candles, is trying to find ways for us to modulate the semester before spring break to let up. And I've talked to Leslie a little bit about this. I think we at McCourt can try to figure out a way to do this ourselves. So I'm very interested in hearing your feedback, not necessarily tonight, but if you have thoughts about how we might be able to calm things down kind of mid-semester, we're open to hearing that stuff from you. So the kinds of things we've talked about are maybe having a week without assignments, maybe telling people that they should cancel class twice during the semester. We're just trying to find different ways to kind of let up on things. And I don't know if that will translate in McCourt having a policy about that for all of our students. That's something that we'll have to see. So late start, later end, a late spring break. That's the plan. Case K, I see your hand. You are muted.
Sorry, should get used to this by now. So you were talking about the holidays and, you know, trying to group the holidays together versus spreading them out as per usual and that kind of thing. Were there or are there any discussions regarding maybe not the entire Georgetown community, but at least McCourt fully committing to an online spring semester at some point? Because then I'd imagine that the issue of people traveling in between holidays and whatnot wouldn't be as big of an issue if we were to just commit right off the bat. I don't know if that's an authority that you guys have or if it's going to be a school decision or whatever, but has this, or if it's not a decision that could be made by the McCourt School, has Georgetown discussed the possibility of fully committing to an online format at this point? Because, you know, if they just commit to that now, then I'd imagine they'd be able to save up a lot of money on all the, you know, COVID testing and, you know, introducing further whatever they need to make sure that it doesn't spread on campus.
Yeah, so we don't have the authority to do that. I think that's point number one. That's not something we could decide. There's been, the only school that has had the authority and has done that is SCS. SCS made a decision pretty early on that they were going to be all online, but they already do a lot of their programming online anyway, so it wasn't as much of a big deal. The overwhelming, I think, feedback that leadership has gotten is that people want to be back. You know, I was in a meeting today with the provost and, you know, he was saying, well, oh, surprisingly, now I have a new group beating up on me. Those are the people that are saying, why are we coming back at all? He's been hearing a lot about people who, why aren't we bringing everyone back? So I think the fact that we're bringing people back reflects, let me say a couple things. There are a significant minority of people who I think agree with that perspective, that we shouldn't bring people back. I think if the public health group had its way and didn't have to answer to anyone else, that might be what they would have chosen. But there's a lot of pressure to bring people back. And that's the balancing act that I think leadership is trying to deal with. So I don't think that that's in, like, I don't know if we're going to be back. I think it's going to depend highly on what happens in terms of the world, and no one can read the future. It doesn't sound promising what's ahead of us, and I hope all of you are being safe. But you know, there's a chance that would happen, and but we're not planning for that, so we can't sort of think about putting in the kinds of breaks I think that you're implying that we could do if we were all remote, because that's not something that we're planning for. That's just the reality of it.
And if I can also respond to that too, I think two things. One, students can choose to be completely remote. You are not being forced to come in person. You don't have to. The faculty who are, the second thing is the faculty who are choosing to teach a hybrid mode, that's their choice. They volunteered to do that. We surveyed all of our spring faculty to ask them, and it's about a third of our courses. And as you can see, there's core courses, there's electives, it sort of runs the gamut of the different types of faculty. The faculty also at any point can decide they're not going to do hybrid, they're going to be fully remote. You know, we tried to get a fairly firm decision from them at this point, but again, this could change at any time. So for example, any of you who are thinking of taking Seb Jilke's public management class for the MPP program, he just decided today that he's going to teach fully remote. He sort of saw the pictures that we had sent out about what a hybrid class looks like, and I don't think really thought through all of sort of the challenges that come with that. So we'll send an email tomorrow updating everyone, and as soon as we find out from other faculty. So I know that's going to be a little bit of frustrating, but that's going to be the flexibility. The one thing I don't see changing is the academic calendar at this point. I think we're fully committed to it. Financial aid is based upon it. all of you, all of the faculty, everyone needs to make their plans for the spring semester. So even if the university decides at some point they will go fully remote, and I know a couple people had asked for a date when they would decide that. They haven't said one. That November 16th announcement was really kind of the first time we had a specific date. So we don't know. If we find out a date that they'll make that decision by, we will certainly let you know.
So one thing that I will say, and I think it'll be a work in progress. I think we have to wait and see whether the university comes up with a way of modulating the pace of the semester in the middle to make it easier for people. But what I will pledge is that if the university can't come up with something, I will pledge that the administration will work with MSA to try to figure out a way to build in some of that for everybody, because I do think that's quite important. You don't have to be in the classroom very long this semester to see that people are tired, and it's a real drag at this point. So we will do the best we can, but I think we just have to wait a little bit to see what the university does. Nicole had a question that I think she raised, that I think was raised also earlier, but it's a really good question, and I don't have I don't actually have a great answer for her. She said, well, why didn't, if things are supposed to be so bad in the winter, why didn't, or, was there a consideration of bringing people back later in the semester? And interestingly, this came up, but it was never seriously discussed, from my understanding, by the Public Health Committee. And I'm not sure exactly why it was not seriously discussed. So as far as I know, that's off the table, but I don't know why it's off the table. I don't know why that decision wasn't pursued in a more systematic way as we did other things. I just don't know about that. But it doesn't seem like we've gotten any real conversation about that. So I suspect that that's not going to be an option. I can't tell you the reasoning for that. I don't know the answer to that. And I haven't heard anybody, and I am being I'm trying to be very transparent. If I had heard something, I would tell you that, but I really don't know why that wasn't taken seriously as an option, because it does make a certain amount of sense, at least to me. A couple more things. McCourt was given the option of whether we would continue to allow students to take classes pass-fail. And we did make a decision that we will continue to allow you to take classes pass-fail next semester. You will have until the last study day for semester-long courses, and I believe for courses if you're doing a module in the first half, you have until the last day of classes to make a decision. So very similar to, pretty much identical to what we did before. I do really encourage you, if you're thinking about taking courses pass-fail, to talk to Nirmala, to talk to me, to talk to your faculty directors, to make sure you're making a good decision. And it's not clear what the right decision is in that regard, but let us work with you as you think about doing that, because we want you to make the best decision for yourselves. So that's something that is an option that we are keeping. So we had the choice not to do that, but we chose to do that. In terms of, we continue to be very interested in getting feedback about how things are going and how things can be improved for the spring. The faculty continues to work with Candles in their course design institutes to figure out how to arrange their classes. I think people are pretty much at a point now where it's hard to make adjustments in how they've decided to teach. But if you have feedback about how the semester has gone, the mix of synchronous versus asynchronous, breaks I know were an issue in class, making sure you got breaks. If there are things that worked well versus things that didn't work well, please share that information with us. And know that when you do your teaching, when you do your evaluations for your faculty, the administration sees the numerical scores, but we as the administration don't get to see the written comments. So if you want the administration to see comments about particular classes, or if you have general thoughts about what seems to work for you versus what doesn't seem to work, please feel free to share those with Leslie or with me. Do it anonymously if you want to. We certainly won't pass on your name if you send something to us, but we value that kind of feedback. And I'll just tell you from my own experience that students are really heterogeneous. Some people really like being synchronous, and a lot of people like the opportunity to be asynchronous. So if you see that we don't adopt something that you think works well for you, just know that almost for every issue, when I've surveyed my students, people are on both sides of the table on particular things. But we do value your feedback. And if there are ways for us that you think we need to work with particular faculty members, we certainly are willing to do that. That's part of what our job is to do, if we can improve classes. As the semester starts in the spring, there will be a number of faculty members teaching who haven't taught for us either at all or haven't taught remotely for us, didn't teach in the fall. If you feel like we need to advise people and give people a helping hand, we're happy to do that. So do just feel free to reach out about those kinds of things. We do review syllabi. We want to make sure that you know what your schedule is for your deliverables, that those are kind of marked in stone, that there's flexibility to the extent that there can be, but there are no surprises in a bad way. So if that's happening, you need to, obviously we always encourage you to talk to your faculty member first to try to resolve things. But if you need someone to facilitate those conversations, we can do that for you. That's part of what our role is. So, we are here to help you be successful. We want to make this work as best as we can for you. All right, let me talk about one more thing, the thing that I sort of don't want to talk about, but I need to talk about with you before I turn it over to Leslie. I know that there's a lot of unhappiness about the 5% tuition discount. I share your unhappiness. I get it. I don't have good answers for you. I have sort of what I've heard the answers to be, but that I can tell you is pretty much a done deal. That is not going to be negotiable. That decision has been made. One of the things that I want to talk about with regard to that is that, it's hard to say, like, is there any good news in this? I don't know if there's any good news. I can tell you that all the seniors who come back to campus are losing their discount. And if you come back to campus and take courses in a hybrid fashion, or if you use our facilities, you will not lose the discount. So that's a little bit of an advantage that graduate students are getting relative to undergraduate seniors. I guess what I want to emphasize is that, the financial cost of the pandemic is pretty severe. And you might not think that a 5% tuition discount matters, moving from 5 to 10% matters, but I know from the budget perspective, that was the other committee I didn't mention to you, that there's a budget committee that also has a role in sort of thinking about these things. But I know one of the issues is that there is a concern about loss of revenue. Most of the tuition that we raise goes to compensation for people. There are not a lot of, at this point especially, there are not a lot of ways for Georgetown to save money. What I mean by that is that, we have some buildings closed, we've turned off utilities in buildings, the faculty and the staff have lost Georgetown's contribution to retirement for this year. The university is doing everything in its power to not lay off people and to keep people employed. That is part of, I think, a value of Georgetown. And we're getting to the point where there are not a lot of levers left for people, or a lot of levers left for the university to cut spending beyond what has been done without potentially putting people at risk, which we're really trying to avoid doing. That is something very, very important to Maria, and it's important to all of us at McCourt that we keep our community whole. And I think that's generally shared across other schools as well. So, I think I think the feeling is that we just don't have an easy way of making up the revenue if we reduced tuition further. I think the argument that has been made in the past, I'm reporting now. I'm not preaching right now. I'm reporting to you what I've heard. I think the argument that has been made for why undergraduates got a bigger tuition cut than graduate students is that there's much more of a residential component to the undergraduate experience than there is to the graduate experience. I don't want to get into a debate about that because I probably agree with you about much of that, but that is, I think, the way that people were thinking about it. So the reality is that the 5% is here to stay, I believe. I don't think that there's any way that we can increase that. I know that there's going to be a push to raise more funds and to try to identify resources that we can give to students who are in need. You know, there may be more CARES money that we can distribute. There may be, the graduate school, I think, is trying to identify a pool of money that can be distributed. Those are the kinds of things where I think we can try to work. But I think the 5% tuition is a done deal, and I don't think there's anything that we can do about that collectively. So let me stop there. Let me see if there are any more questions before I turn it over to Leslie. And I think we'll have time for general questions as well at the end, even if you don't have any now. There's no need to, you don't have to come up with questions if you're not ready yet. Rachel.
So this actually goes back to part of the discussion on classes. Has there been any conversation about other classes becoming hybrid after spring break, or what's hybrid now is what's going to happen? And if you don't have a class on campus, you don't have a class on campus. I
think that's what's likely to happen. I know that there's no ability at this point to add additional hybrid classes. One of the questions that you could maybe imagine is, well, what would happen if all of a sudden the world gets healthy? I don't think we think that's a high enough probability that I've heard any real discussion about that. So I think the best way to think about this is that what's hybrid now is what's going to be hybrid. I don't think there's going to be any additions to that. Okay. And I just wanted to say one thing sort of unofficially about, you know, if things improve. If there's a vaccine, you all have studied, or many of you have studied, implementation of policy. One of the things that we know is that once there's a vaccine, there's a whole other set of issues about how you distribute the vaccine and who gets it first and all of that kind of thing. So it's not like if we have a vaccine tomorrow, all of a sudden everything will be back to normal. That's just not the reality of what's going to happen. So I don't think it's likely that there'll be more classes that are in person or have in-person elements. Having said the last part of what I said, for the students, if we are still figuring out whether we need to have in-person elements for international students. That's still a discussion. There's a chance that the first day that Biden is in office, he could change policy on this issue. If we need to make in-person elements available to people who don't have a hybrid course, that's a done deal. We will make that happen one way or the other, so you shouldn't worry about that. Okay, so I'm not going anywhere, but I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let Leslie talk to you about some other things.
No problem. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about access to study spaces, activities, other services, commencement, and sort of thinking about the future. So particularly pertaining to Rachel's question about, you know, some students are not going to have any hybrid courses, whether that's in their program or the way their schedule works out. We have heard from the university that they are working for all graduate students who are in the DC area and able to get to campus to be able to have access to study spaces on campus. So the library, the McShane lounges, some other spaces within the student center. And that's going to be on a reservation system. Students will have to go through the testing protocols, even if they're not in the neighborhood, even if they're not attending a hybrid class in order to use any of the spaces on campus. In fact, they're creating an app almost like an open table where students can put in their reservations in order to get access to these spaces. We don't think that you're going to have access to Old North. That's one thing, it's not on the list. They haven't talked about opening up Old North. They're looking at spaces that would be common spaces for all graduate students, so the car barn, student lounge, and others. They are probably limiting the access to just graduate students, so the undergraduate residential students and seniors would not be able to get into these spaces. They would just be for graduate students, since a lot of the feedback has been it's been really difficult to study at home or to have reliable Wi-Fi, or even particularly group meetings or study meetings. You may have the opportunity, following all the health protocols, to have group meetings, capstone meetings, whatever it may be, as long as they're under 10, as long as you're in a room that you can socially distance and wear masks, and again, have the protocol. The university, as you saw, has also been working with WeWork spaces across the world and in the DC area to get access for Georgetown students to be able to use their facilities for study spaces and for Wi-Fi. We've asked a few specific questions about that, haven't gotten any answers yet about what that looks like, how do you access it, but we know a couple students had asked about, sort of, well, what are the protocols? Would they be safe? WeWork will need to follow the protocols that are, from the locations that they're in with the spaces. But that's one of those free, no charge resources that will be available. So as soon as we get more information about that, we'll let you know. We've been told that all of our official activities, so whether career development, employer events, or networking opportunities, right now, student organizations, students activities, everything still needs to be virtual for this spring semester. As you may know, in like this fall semester, you can still go to campus. You can be physically outside on campus. You can be in a group of fewer than 10, again, socially distanced, masks, but without having to take the testing protocols. But that's only to be outside, and you can't access bathrooms. So that's something to consider as well. But I know the MIDP program, they've had a couple informal social activities. Professor Shoney had met with a couple students. So some things for all of us to consider about, creating those in-person connections if possible. But as of now, all official activities are going to be virtual. If that changes, we will let you know. So we will still continue to work together with our incredible student organizations, with MSA, and looking for opportunities for community building and networking. Soon to be announced, there's going to be an upcoming holiday party. I know MSA is working on a policy directory for this semester. Jackie will be hosting the policy challenge in the spring. So we'll continue to do the community building and engagement programs, but I know it's not the same. I know for those of you who are new students, not being on campus, it's difficult to build community. And also for the returning students, that some of you have only been on campus for, a semester and a half. And then our poor MPM students who started this summer are probably never going to have in-person experiences while they're here during this time. So we'll be looking for ways, again, to continue that virtual programming, but we're also looking forward to and thinking about, when it is safe for all of us to be on campus, what can we do to welcome back alums? What can we do for students to help, create that community and bring you back? So I'll talk about that in a moment. But for those of you who are graduating, so far there's been no decisions made yet about commencement in the spring semester. As you may have seen, with sort of everything getting pushed back, the last official day of finals in the semester is Wednesday, May 19th. We believe that your graduation date will officially be Thursday, May 20th. We're waiting on discussion about that. So there's one thing about a graduation date, there's another thing about a commencement ceremony and what's that's going to be looking like. And Jackie's on a commencement committee that hopefully will start meeting up again to talk about how that's going to be. And if it does end up being virtual, what do we do then? Do we have a fall ceremony when we're back in person? Do we, have a combined ceremony the following May? We don't know, but as soon as we get information, we'll let you know on that. For summer 2021, because some of you will, be here to either take classes or wondering what's going on with that. Again, we don't know. We don't have any ideas of what the summer semester is going to look like. Unfortunately, we don't have a date for when we will know this by. We hope, I believe, Nirmala, correct me if I'm wrong, but summer registration starts kind of in February, early February. So we're,
That's correct.
yeah, hoping to have some additional information about what the summer semester will look like. Some of you will not take classes this summer, but we're hoping to offer a few electives like we did last summer. So if you wanted to register for some courses to lighten your coursework for next year, we certainly can work with you and help you on that. We'll probably have 3 to 4 electives. We're working on them right now, along with the MPP EP core courses and the MPM courses that happen over the summer. Last summer, some of the returning students and recent graduates participated in our enhanced and advanced workshops that I think there were 20 or so workshops that ran the gamut from sort of understanding federal budget to introduction to Python to, global pandemic economics. So we're looking to bring back our enhanced and advanced workshops, as well as trying to figure out a lot of different things that can help students continue to build their skills, continue to help out in their courses and their career development. So that's what we're sort of looking for summer 2021. And then, as you can imagine, the answer for what does next fall look like, we don't know. And unfortunately don't have any specific dates about when we would know this by. We're hoping that everything will look very different very soon and be in a much more positive light to know what's going to happen in the fall semester. Typically, registration for the fall begins sort of in the April timeframe. We are actually starting to work on the fall schedule, if you can believe that now. And as we talk with faculty, we're saying we hope it'll be 100% in person. I think if we're able to do that, we will, and therefore there would be no remote options. But again, this is all to be determined. But I wanted to go back for those of you who are graduating, or for those of you first year students who haven't been on campus, or our MPM students, we really are thinking about opportunities such as, permitting you to come back and audit classes in person and not have to pay for it. Right now, if you want to audit a class, you would have to register, pay for the class, pay full rate, and sit in on the class. So we're going to look at that as an opportunity, so you can get that in-person class experience. Keep inviting you to our events that'll be in person. You may not know this, but as alums, you get lifetime access to career development, both the Georgetown Alumni Association career development, but also the McCourt career development. You will continue to get access to your Georgetown email, and we're looking into getting access to the library and other resources to help you out, so that you're able to continue to be an important part of our community. We typically don't have any events during alumni weekend or homecoming weekend on campus. We're going to look to do some events to do whatever we can to welcome back our alums who were only here for a little bit in person or never had that in-person experience. So that's all to be determined. But if there are things that you think would be really helpful for you as alums or as for students that we can be offering to sort of, I hate to say it, but make up or compensate for the virtual environment and provide you the in-person experiences you want, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. So those are some of the things that we're already thinking about. MSA has brought to our attention as questions from you, because this is not what I know any of us really signed up for when we decided to come to graduate school. This is certainly not any of our graduate school experiences. So whatever we can do to replicate those experiences, enhance those experiences in the future, we'd be happy to try to do that with what Center means. I see free printing would be nice. I totally agree with you. And expanded mental health services. I know that the university has been working with CAPS and especially for students who are out of state or in other parts of the world, to find, professionals that can help students with that. And they're looking to expand that for the spring semester. So we expect more coming out. Free printing, I don't know about, but certainly can put that on the list. Thanks, Bray. So I'll end there as far as sort of the extracurricular, sort of non-hybrid courses. See if you have any questions about that or about how next semester is going to look. So we'll just open it up for questions now for the last 5 minutes or so. Looking for any hands or drop in the chat. I think I see Max Brossi. If you can unmute and let us know what your questions are.
Good evening. I saw in your email about the spring break intensives and that some of them are taking place at different times, like very different times.
Right.
Would it be relatively possible to sign up for and take multiple if they're at different times?
So yeah, that's going to be up to you. It's something to think about. So for those of you who didn't get a chance to read my email, there was 4 classes that were originally scheduled for our spring break that was supposed to be the end of February, beginning of March. With the move to the Easter break, sort of combined spring break later in March, some of our faculty could not teach during that time. One of them can. Our American State Legislatures class will be during that time. But the other 3, the faculty have indicated they'd like to teach during what we're now calling the winter session. Georgetown's never had one before, though some programs have offered classes prior to the spring semester beginning. So yes, you can take classes. The first week, January 4th through 11th, is the negotiation class. The second week is the national security decision-making class. The third week is the core MPP ethics course. I would caution you about taking, I was saying today, like, oh, that'd be cool if you take all 3 classes, like you'd only have 1 class left for the spring semester. You are going to have a lot of reading pre and during that actual 1 week class. And all of the classes will have assignments due after the 5th day. So it's just something to think about, especially because it's a quick turnover between a couple classes. You may only have a day or 2. And I don't know if any of our MPM students are on the line or if any of our returning students took a week-long spring break course last year, but they are super intense. And, while you're maybe in class every day from 9 to 4:30 or 5, you are definitely going to be doing work, memos, group things, each night of the class. And then again, sort of after that class is done. So it's just something to think about workload wise. The faculty are working on their syllabi as we speak, but we actually have all of these courses have been offered in week-long formats before. So we have past syllabi if you want to see what the assignments look like, particularly after that. But we think it could be a good way to knock out a couple, 3 credits, and then you'll have a little bit lighter course load in the spring semester.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
So I just want to say before we move on, I see a couple of KDI MPM students here. I know that you're probably thinking about the summer and a little worried. Let me just reassure you that typically by around mid-January, the Office of the University Registrar publishes the schedules for summer. Once that should happen and we have more information, I will definitely be contacting you about registration. So you don't need to worry. We're not going to let you get to the beginning of February when registration begins without all of the information that you need. So you will have that with you. For the MPM students who are also going to be your full-time students, I know that your program evaluation class, both sections are in hybrid mode. So hopefully there might be some opportunities to have you on campus. Hopefully, given the way that the pandemic plays out and whatever we know about the rolling out of the vaccine, I heard Dr. Fauci talking today, and he said preferably he would imagine by April, most people who want a vaccine might have access to one. So fingers crossed on that.
So we've got 1 minute left. Any last minute questions we can ask you? And of course, don't let that be the end of this. Things may occur to you. We may not have addressed things you put in the RSVP list. We'll put together our frequently asked questions and send them out tomorrow, along with the recording of this event. But you're welcome to email me, Barbara, Nirmala, Jackie, anyone, so we can help you think about the spring semester, make decisions. We know registration's coming up Friday morning for most of you. And you know, I promise we will do our best to help you get the best schedule possible for yourselves. I think particularly those for students in different time zones. We were able for the first year MIDP to move some of the sections since they only have one section to be better for the 4 of the 12 students who are studying another time zone. But please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help with anything through the registration process. And thank you, Layla, for putting out. MSA2 is a wonderful advocate for students, and Layla passes along all of the information to us that we pass along to our leadership team, as well as the university leadership team. But Barbara, any final thoughts about the spring?
You know, the final thought is we want this to go as well as possible for all of you. And I hope that we've communicated that we will do what we can to make that happen. I have taken some notes. I will follow up with people here and people outside of McCourt to sort of make them aware of some of the things that are on your mind. We will try to do whatever we can. And just know that we're here to try to help. We have certain things that are limited in our ability to affect, but we do want to hear from you, and we want to do the things that make the experience better for you. So I think all of us are committed to that, and we will try our best. So we are always here for you.
All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us, especially after some very long days again, or for some of you who are just getting up in the morning and about to start a very long day. We really appreciate it, and wish you a good break, Thanksgiving break. We're grateful for all of you. And then when you come back, it'll be another week and a half of class and then into finals, and then you'll have a much longer break. It's one of the benefits of the academic calendar being pushed back a bit. So it was wonderful to see you all. I hope the next town hall we have in February or March is us talking about how we're distributing the vaccines, and we're all going to see each other in person in the summer. So fingers crossed that all